Hello everyone and welcome to RaceWeek, where today we will be looking back on what was a more exciting than usual Russian Grand Prix, as well as also go through the news, and also we launched the new RaceWeek website, which will be unveiled at the end of the stream once we've gone through everything. So, without further ado, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/raceweek_show, and then be sure to check out the new site at the end of the stream, which will be unveiled at the end of the stream. So, firstly, without further ado, let's go in to the news. Okay, so looking at the news, Stefano Domenicali is now going to be CEO of the Formula One group. Big news that occurred during the Russian Grand Prix weekend, where Stefano Domenicali was officially announced to be the new CEO of Formula One. He will be taking over from Chase Carey before next season. And Chase Carey will still be part of Formula One, but will be as an advisory role, I believe. And this has actually been a popular appointment for Formula One. And I think it could go well for Formula One because he knows the sport very well. He's been in motorsport for a long time. And he has a good working relationship with Ross Brawn. So I could see good things coming out of that. But I do think that the job that Chase Carey has done has been quite underrated over the years. Moving on, next, we will see a Schumacher at a Grand Prix weekend at the Nürburgring next week. In fact, we'll see a Schumacher at a race weekend in Germany at the Nürburgring next weekend, which is going to feel a lot of nostalgia. He will be taking part in free practice 1 for Alfa Romeo, replacing Antonio Giovinazzi in the Alfa Romeo. And also, not just Mick Schumacher will be in FP1. All three Ferrari Driver Academy frontrunners in Formula 2 will be given an FP1 drive this season. Callum Ilott will be driving for Haas in FP1, replacing Romain Grosjean at the Nürburgring. And Robert Schwartzman will be driving for a team that's not quite known yet. It's not known what team he's going to drive for, but he will be driving in free practice 1 in Abu Dhabi. I'm assuming it will be Alfa Romeo that he will be driving for. Next up, there have been quite a few concerns about the first corner at Sochi, considering there were quite a few incidents there at Turn 2 and Turn 4 going throughout the weekend. Some people are suggesting that Turn 1 should be made into a Bahrain-like first corner. It should be like a tight corner, such as what it is in Bahrain, which could potentially help. I mean, they've got a lot of space down, particularly in that area. They've got a lot of space around, so they can do quite a lot with Turn 1. The other thing that I'm going to be using this picture for when it comes to the news is that it appears that F1's hopes of bringing in reverse grids have fallen through, and it doesn't look like it, because basically their plan was to try out reverse grids in 2021 with a few individual races to evaluate it, but it seems that that's fallen through. They haven't been able to get the teams to agree, and that doesn't look likely to happen. And as far as other motorsport goes, the British Touring Car Championship continued its season racing at Silverstone this past weekend, and it was quite a pivotal moment in the championship, with Colin Turkington almost managing to retake the lead from Ash Sutton. he managed to do that in the middle round, but it was Dan Kamish who took the first race victory, with Colin Turkington taking the race 2 victory and actually momentarily taking the lead of the standings before Ash Sutton took it back again in a thrilling race 3, which saw Ollie Jackson take his maiden BTCC victory, just fending off Tom Oliphant to take the victory, with Ash Sutton working his way up to third from the back of the grid after a puncture in race 2, although he did actually originally finish in second, but a time penalty dropped him behind. But at the moment, Sutton leads by 4 points back to Colin Turkington in second, with Dan Kamish 13 points behind in third. The other big story of the weekend was a massive crash for Rory Butcher, which thankfully he emerged unscathed from. He made contact with, I believe it was Matt Neal, went heavily into the wall, but he walked away from it. He was lucky not to collect any other cars as well. He walked away and thankfully was unhurt in the crash, and showing the safety levels of these current cars. And we also had the Formula 4 series taking place last weekend, which saw Luke Browning. He did not. His championship lead was chipped away at going in this weekend, but he still has a considerable lead by 33 points back to Zach O'Sullivan in second. Zach O'Sullivan won the second race of the weekend, with James Headley taking the first race of the weekend and Casper Stevenson taking the third race. In the driver's standings, you have Luke Browning, who currently leads the way by 33 points back to Zach O'Sullivan in second, Casper Stevenson in third ahead of Alex Connor, James Headley, Roman Belinsky, Abby Pulling, Christian Mansell, Roberto Faria and Frederick Lubin rounds out the top 10. And that is the news for this weekend, for this week's midweek show. And now it's time to go into analysis. And the main thing I'm going to be analysing is there anything wrong with the first corner complex at Sochi? So the first incident I'm going to look at, because there are quite a few incidents at that corner throughout the weekend, is the first Formula 2 race where there were a few cars taken out after contact. And as you can see what happens, it was kind of a squeeze going into a very tight braking zone. Look at these two Charouz cars and Jury Vips behind. I believe it was PK and Vips that made contact, which sent Vips into Delatrez and then sent Delatrez into Lundgaard. But it is a very awkward corner because it's not like a heavy braking zone, where if it was like a heavy braking zone, such as the first corner in Bahrain, then it's easy to set yourself into a rhythm. That's the thing about this corner, it's hard to put yourself into a clean position because of the nature of the fact it's a kind of a medium speed corner, and it's just very hard to put yourself into a rhythm. And then that, I think, is why we see a lot of incidents here, especially as it's after a very long time on the full throttle, as you can see. And then many drivers went through the escape road, and that's the other issue, the escape road. It was changed a bit for this year. I'm presuming it was changed after the start crash in Formula 2 last year, which sent Matsushita into the wall. And then, as you can see here, it's Carlos Sainz that we need to talk about here. Firstly, as you can see, Max Verstappen, I honestly think it was wrong the way that they did it here with the fact that if you go on one side, if you don't manage to get within that sleeping policeman, you have to go off, because I think that caused a lot more problems than it solved. Maybe they should have been just, if they gained any, because they didn't gain any advantage either. And if they gain an advantage, they're obliged to, maybe they should be just obliged to back off if they gain an advantage from doing so. But as you can see, Max Verstappen went through, and then, as you can see, Carlos Sainz, he actually had to steer away from the pack, and that could easily have resulted in a spin. And then, as you can see, Verstappen gets around well, but then Carlos Sainz, gets himself... Because drivers are not going to want to lift off because they want to get through as fast as possible. But they're basically encouraging drivers to go as fast as possible through a corner, in inverted commas, where there's a concrete wall directly on the outside, which is not right. And as you can see, Carlos Sainz just glanced it and was lucky not to bounce back into the pack. So that's how it all... So that is how things happened with that. And then, I haven't got a picture for this so far, but we have to talk about turn 4. The long turn 4, which is the circuit's most exciting corner. But there are a lot of comments where, after what happened in Formula 2, is it a dangerous corner? Because as we saw, 2 cars making one bit of contact and then bang into the wall at basically unabated speed. And I was actually starting to speculate that maybe a safer barrier could be a better option at that corner, considering how well it works in IndyCar. That withstands higher loads than that would withstand. But how would a safer barrier hold up in a sideways impact that has happened at this corner, such as we saw Romain Grosjean have in 2015? That's the question. But I'm pretty sure that the FIA will look at it, because unlike other corners, you can't really move that barrier that much further back. And there's not really much that can be done with the circuit either to eliminate that corner. Unless you put a chicane in the middle of it, which is not going to go down well with fans. And then the final thing I have to talk about is we're now starting to see a fallibility with Mercedes. In the sense that for the second time in 3 races, they have made what could be described as a little bit of a careless mistake, braking and getting a penalty in the process. In Monza, their careless mistake was entering the pit lane whilst the pit lane was closed. And the second one here was doing a practice start in a dangerous position. And both times it was the team that was mostly responsible for the error. And it just seems to be a bit of a fallibility with Mercedes that they seem to have carelessly breached rules quite a few times. And it's going to be interesting to see if they are now going to be taking extra precautions to make sure that they don't break any more rules mistakenly. So that is now the analysis, and now let's talk about where do we stand right now, the current state of play in this, with 7 rounds to go. Don't want to get the results up. That's an old result. 7 rounds to go, the current state of play. I don't know why it's got that picture up. But the current state of play going into the Nürburgring next week. And the drivers' standings right now, it's Lewis Hamilton. He lost 10 points of his lead in Sochi, but now he still has a 44-point lead. And Lewis has gone... The times that F1's raced at the Nürburgring in recent years that Lewis has been there, Lewis has tended to go well there. He won in quite thrilling circumstances in 2011 there. And also he was on pole position in 2013. So it's a good track for Lewis. So I think that he could extend his advantage at this race. 44 points back to Valtteri Bottas in second, who's only raced there once. And then you have... Most drivers on the grid have never raced in Formula 1 at the Nürburgring. They probably have in other series. A lot of them have in other series. But when it comes to Formula 1, they haven't yet. Max Verstappen is currently in third. He's starting to fall away. Although he did split the Mercedes this past weekend. Ahead of Lando Norris, who is hanging on to his 4th place by a thread. Then you have Alex Albon in 5th. Daniel Ricciardo, who's really extracting everything from that Renault, in 6th. Then you have Charles Leclerc in 7th, who's really getting the maximum out of that Ferrari. Then you have Lance Stroll in 8th. Sergio Perez in 9th. The two, not much between the two Racing Points at the moment in 8th and 9th. With Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 10 on 45 points. In the Constructors' standings, Mercedes are looking on to take a 7th consecutive trophy ahead of Red Bull in 2nd on 192. Then there's not much between McLaren, Racing Point and Renault for 3rd in the Constructors, separated by 8 points in the Constructors' standings, with McLaren 2 points ahead of Racing Point in 3rd, Racing Point 5 points ahead of Renault in 4th. More like 7 points separating these three teams. Then you have Ferrari, who's now starting to fall into the clutches of AlphaTauri. Then you have Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams, who seem to be this season's backmarkers. And now let's have a look at the current state of play when it comes to Formula One's main feeder series, which is Formula 2. And it has to be said, it is starting to look good for Mick Schumacher. He currently leads the standings by 22 points back to Callum Ilott in 2nd. Then you have a close battle for 3rd between Tsunoda, Lundgaard and Schwartzman. And I think, to be honest, this title is starting to look like it is between Schumacher and Ilott. Schwartzman has just fallen away, and I'm actually starting to think another season in Formula 2 could do him good. Because the thing about him is, he has shown the pace. He's shown he has the pace to make F1, but he hasn't delivered consistently enough. But when he's delivered, he has really delivered. Then you have Nikita Mazepin, who is level with Schwartzman in 6th in the standings. You have Delatrez. Guan Yu Zhou took his maiden win, albeit in odd circumstances, in 8th. Then you have Luca Giotto in 9th, and Dan Ticktum rounds out the top 10. And that is the current state of play in Formula 2. And now, So now that we have looked at the current state of play, now it's time to go into the Race Week moments of the week. And so, as per usual, we have the top 5 moments and in ascending order. In 5th place, we have the Battle of the Streamers. All the virtual G and esports enthusiasts felt a lot of nostalgia watching this, as these three battled a lot in the virtual GP and also in many other streams that they did online as well. And they had quite an intense battle in the end, and it was quite good to see. These three are really good friends with each other, and I'm pretty sure they probably enjoyed having an on-track battle with each other. Also was reminiscent of the 2018 F2 days as well, seeing as it was these three that fought it out for the title in Formula 2. In 4th place, we have Mick Schumacher making headlines. There was a lot of attention when Mick Schumacher crossed the line to take probably his best victory so far out of the 3 that he's taken. He actually had to legitimately fight for it, and he managed to conserve his tyres enough, and he managed to overtake Yuki Tsunoda to take the win. And the amount of attention, I remember Sky were talking quite a lot about it at the beginning of the FP3 broadcast. And the amount of attention that he got was quite a lot. And he is looking on to graduate into Formula 1 next year. At number 3, we have another out-of-bounds moment for Lewis Hamilton, doing a practice start. And as I said, I've talked about it already, but another careless breach of a rule from the Silver Arrows, or this year. It's the second time it's happened in 3 races, and I'm pretty sure that they are going to be looking at it to make sure that no further breaches happen. At number 2, and this was a big moment, Luca Giotto and Jack Aitken escaping a horror crash. And I honestly think that when it came to that race, that was the most important thing to celebrate, them being okay after such a horrific shunt. Where, I mean, the moment they hit the wall was one of those hold your breath moments where you don't know if the driver is okay. But then seeing both drivers climb out of their cars. In fact, in Giotto's case, it wasn't really a car that he climbed out of. It was basically like a skip within the Tech Pro barrier that he climbed out of. It looked like it was just climbing out of a destroyed Tech Pro barrier. And when they cut to that, there was probably a sigh of relief around the whole world who was watching. And I believe he didn't even have to go. Didn't seem he even went to even had to go to the medical center, because he was back in the pits literally like 20 minutes after the crash. And at number 1, we have, to whom it may concern, Valtteri Bottas taking the victory. And I'm pretty sure this would have felt good for Valtteri after many races of being unable to get on top of his teammate. Yes, some fate did have to intervene with Lewis getting that penalty, but crossing the line first, and considering all of his critics, must have felt really good for him. So that's why this is a worthy number 1 on the list. And now, before we conclude, as I mentioned, it is now time to launch the new RaceWeek site. Now, I'm sorry that there was a little bit of delays. It was intended to be launched last week, but I wanted to make sure it was all ready first. And now there's still a bit of work to do. As you can see, there are a few unfinished bits on the site, but it's ready to be in the public domain. And also, the new website is going to be RaceWeekblog.com. So be sure to pay the new website a visit at RaceWeekblog.com, where right now we have a homepage and a blog page as well, where there's going to be quite a few blog posts, as well as keeping people updated. It also links to the YouTube and the Twitter accounts this website does, and also there's going to be a link to audio content. That is something that's going to be coming later on. So here is a picture of the website. As you can see, there's a menu at the top. We'll have a link to all the socials with more stuff that will be added to the website going forward. And also, to launch this website, we have a new blog post, which is my personal opinion about why signing Sergio Perez is an obvious thing to do for Red Bull this year, and stating why. So be sure to give that a look. So that is the new RaceWeek website, raceweekblog.com, and be sure to give it a check out. There's going to be a lot of content on this website, particularly over the next 8 or so months. So without further ado, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to check that out, and also be sure to follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/raceweek_show, and leave a like and subscribe to the RaceWeek YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next. My plan is to have a driver lineup video predicting the rest of the 2020 grid, which will hopefully come in the next few days. And so thank you very much for watching. Make sure to stay tuned for that, and we'll see you, as far as live show is concerned, we will see you next Thursday for the midweek show, where we will preview the Eiffel Grand Prix, which will take place at the Nürburgring. Thank you very much for watching. See you next week. Goodbye.